Thank you for tuning in to Rise Above TV, where we are empowering humanity and supporting unity. You're watching Cracking the Codependency Code with relationship coaches Janie Terrazas and Barry Selby.
Hello everyone, welcome to Cracking the Codependency Code. And on this video, we thought we'd dive into people pleasing. We talked a little bit about it in one of the other videos, which was about the savior and the enabler and the white knight that Barry used to be. Now he's still a white knight, but he's a wiser white knight. He's a balanced white knight. He's not a codependent white knight.
In the hierarchy of language of masculine and feminine, it's more like king and queen now. So stop being the prince or the knight.
Ooh, that's true. And y'all should look into that. Yeah, there's that whole, the knight, the prince, the king, and ultimately men and women are, as we go through our evolution, as we heal ourselves and get to discover ourselves and start to do the course correction and that personal growth work so that we can be the optimal version of who we are supposed to be, or not supposed to be, but who we were intended to be and designed to be. The reason why we're all here is to evolve into the optimal supreme self, right? The soul self. And when we tap into our divinity, right, there's that human side of ourselves and then there's that divine side of ourselves. And they both are important, but one is wiser and more intelligent. And that's really when we step into our kingship and our queenship. And you really can't step into that light side of yourself, always recognizing the dark side, but not operating from that place anymore, because that's a place of pain and suffering. So you take the wisdom and the lessons and the learnings from the pain and suffering, and then you rise above and shift into this reality and into this way of being and thinking and feeling and perceiving. It changes everything. And we know that what causes a lot of human beings to suffer is this lack of self-love, which kind of ties to codependency, behaviors of codependency. So we'll get right into people-pleasing, because man, did I have lots of work to do on that one. So how for you?
I was going to say, do you want to jump in?
Oh, okay, okay, so one, I want to touch on, and there's a reason for it, okay, the different types of ways in which we respond to trauma, so there's fight, flight, freeze, but then there's fawn. And guys, you need to research this, especially for those of us that have sex trauma, but it's not just sex trauma. Fawning is when you take on the desires of another and come from a place of that matters more than you, because codependency, like he said in the previous episode, that savior thing is like a slave. And so there's this, I was relating to sort of being an object and a slave and at the mercy of another person, and believing that I was wanting what they wanted or what they were wanting was okay, or that their discomfort, it mattered more to not let them feel uncomfortable. It was better for me to feel uncomfortable. I don't want to make you feel pain. I would rather absorb the pain.
Take the pain away from them so they can be okay.
Yeah, so they can be okay. Exactly. Right. And so I had sex trauma, so I had that fawn thing going on inside of me that I did not know I had. So now, going back to what you were saying, people pleasing, earlier, saying no. So I never wanted to disappoint anybody. Going back to that fawning, you don't want to disappoint me. You would rather feel the pain and discomfort. So when somebody would be like, oh, will you help me put the party favors together for my baby shower that's coming up and blah, 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 blah.
Of course.
Oh, yes, of course. Oh, will you do this? Will you do that? And funny enough, it's all these little ways that I started flexing the no. And some of them would be like, oh, but this and that. And I would have to say no 3 times. And it was hard enough for me to say it the first time. I felt that uncomfortability, feel the discomfort of saying no. You're going to feel it in your tummy, you might feel it in your throat, you might feel it here. You start to connect emotions and thoughts to how it impacts your actual physical vessel. And that was really, really interesting. And those sensations will cause you to say yes. So it's like learning how to work with that. Does that make sense?
Yes, because one of those things also is that what you're also doing, besides changing your tune, so to speak, you're also retraining everybody around you. Because, as you were saying, you had to say no 3 times. I'm suspecting that maybe one of those was because they didn't hear it the first time. Bingo. Or the second time.
Maybe not. Yep.
So maybe it was the fact you had to say it so many times because they didn't believe, because they're so used to you saying yes. So that they didn't actually take your no as a real thing.
They didn't take me seriously. But eventually they did, and it made it easier. You know what I mean? Way easier.
Mm-hmm.
And then it starts to bleed into everything else too.
The challenge with people pleasing is it's a habit we get into, so it becomes familiar, it becomes comfortable.
It's like a nature.
Well, it's almost like you can become comfortable in the discomfort.
Yeah.
That's one of our bad habits we have. It's like you notice, for example, if you are, I think it's actually biological. It's like if you're in an environment where you smell a certain smell, after a couple of minutes, that smell, you don't smell it anymore. It's like it's gone into the background because we become comfortable with it. And so our body has this ability to adapt to environments. And in relationships, family, business, friendships, romantic, all of those relationships, certain discomforts can become comfortable because we don't know how to do anything differently.
I was adopted as a child, a baby, into a family that gave me every love language. I did not know how much of a jackpot I landed in until I was a little bit older, and I give blessings all the time for my family. The thing about my parents, though, as wonderful and loving as they are, they give the shirt off their back. There's no boundaries. They got taken advantage of all the time by like general contractors, and because they want to see the good in people and they believe people, and then they would get screwed over, and it was like, oh, and people wonder why do bad things happen to good people? Mostly because we don't have healthy boundaries. And I'm not saying that that's the only reason, but you'd be surprised when you start diving into this stuff how much pain and suffering you could have averted and avoided. And it's not about regret. And it's not about going back and being like, oh, I shoulda, woulda, coulda, although that's going to happen sometimes. What matters is, what are you going to do with that information now? So being that my parents were so accommodating, because of the sex trauma and because I was raised by parents like that and I love them, it's better to course correct that. I'd rather be too nice and not know how to discern and not have healthy boundaries to some degree.
Than have no desire to be nice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
People pleasing as a theme is tied to a few pieces. People pleasing is largely tied to the fact that we think that somebody else's love is more important than our own love. That somebody else's approval is more important than our own approval. That basically we externalize our feelings and our needs and put other people in the place of responsibility for our feeling okay. Pure codependence. So we are pleasing them to make sure we continue to be fed that way. It's almost like having to make sure you keep giving the dealer the money so you keep getting the drugs.
I was just going to say, it's like heroin.
In a way it is. The trap we fall into is that we keep needing to make sure we take care of them so we get what we think we need from them to fill up the gap we have inside, falsely believing we have a gap inside.
I'll buy that for $1.
Robocop quotes now? You just drop movie quotes everywhere. I love it.
I know. It's one of those weird little quirks of mine. But, it really is. It's like until we recognize the void within, because we're always looking for external things, whether it be, like you said, attention from a person, approval, validation,
love. Any of those,
love. Yeah. And sometimes we're not filling the void necessarily with a human being. It could be through consumption of food, sex even. Sex isn't always a relationship. Sometimes we're getting that attention and filling that void just from sex, and we're being intimate with people who really don't really respect us very much. It's like... It's not about respect, it's about getting that fulfillment for a moment, that glimpse. And like drugs, it is transitory, it is temporary. Yes. Yeah, and it's a transaction. It's like this transactional thing that's taking place, and sadly, that is a big way in which people are getting that fix, the void, trying to fill the void, because it is still connection, but it's not intimacy. People think that intimacy is sex itself, and it's not.
No.
That's mental connection, emotional connection, spiritual connection, and so there's like a whole sacredness to our sexuality that's sort of been disconnected. And I don't want to go too much into that.
That's a whole other topic.
Yeah, that's
That'd be a whole other series.
Yeah, that's another. Yeah, true. I really would love to do a whole series on how we have been the wound around sex and our sexuality and our bodies.
We might touch it in this series because there are some codependent pieces to that too.
Okay.
However, there's a lot more besides that we'll get into.
Yeah.
So let me just switch gears slightly, because to get to people pleasing, you mentioned about that feeling to be sort of not willing to say no. So I spoke in one of the other videos about agreement keeping and about being able to say no, because I want to get as a homework assignment to say no. Here's the thing. Part of the challenge of being a people pleaser is it's wrong for us to say no to anything. We're in a place where we must say yes, because if we say yes, then people will be pleased with us. Again, people pleasing. And we please them by being a yes person, a yes man, or a yes woman, whatever it is. So understanding that that yes is not a choice anymore, because you've given up the choice, you made it automatic. So it's time to disengage, to undo that one and reverse it. And I learned this from a seminar many, many years ago. One of the problems we have when we're seeking approval out there, or love out there, or attention, or approval, all those different things, approval twice, interesting, or being pleased from somebody else, it's all externally referenced, which means that it's up to them to give it to us. The challenge with this, again, part of the trap of codependency is, when we put our needs on somebody else and they don't come through, we feel upset. So our upset is controlled by somebody else's actions. That's not in our control anymore. That's codependency at its worst. Mm-hmm. So agreements. One of the biggest things we don't recognize we can do is the ability to say no. We've been trained by a society that we've got to be nice to people. We should say yes. Keep your agreements. Because keeping agreements, by the way, keeping agreements is where we build trust with ourselves. When you say yes to something and you do it, that's like putting a tick in the trust column and you're building more trust in yourself.
That's a great way to put it.
It works.
Mm-hmm.
Now here's the thing. When you say yes to something, you're saying yes to two people. One, to other people. Secondly, to yourself. So agreement keeping is powerful. But when you say yes too many times, you're likely to come up with some problems because you start not doing what you said you're going to do. You'll overbook your time. You'll start saying things you do and you don't do them because you forget, you don't write them down, whatever it is. So here's the thing about agreements. You want to make them manageable. Because for your own self-esteem, for your own self-support, for your own self-approval, your agreements must be things that you can maintain and can contain. So you can actually be in more alignment to yourself. So with agreements, there's a few rules. One of which is to make sure you know the agreements you've made. Because again, if you overcommit, you can't fulfill those agreements. You start becoming disappointed, upset, depressed, hurt feelings, you're not pleasing anybody or yourself, and you end up losing. So keep track of what agreements you have. So write them down, or put them in your phone, or put them somewhere in your calendar. Then be clear, because you start realizing, oh my God, I made that many agreements. Is you need to start basically making less agreements in the first place. Because if you can't do them in the time you've given yourself, you're going to upset somebody.
Yes.
Including yourself. Because again, agreements with yourself are key. So
I mean, like, I'm having, like, epiphanies over here left and right. I'm sure I've been making funny faces over here.
Yeah, I'm tend to keep that over there. So one of the things I said in the other video is saying no. One of the biggest things that we have been maybe not trained in, when somebody asks you to do something, or you want to do something, you decide you want to do something. And you say, you know what, ultimately, if I do that, it's not going to work. I need to say no to that, either with somebody else or even with yourself. Mm-hmm. So writing them down, making few agreements, saying no, and then in the worst case scenario, because you do an agreement that you're stuck with, see if you can renegotiate. Because you may have agreements that maybe like 3-month agreements that you're in the middle of, they're realizing you can't fulfill to the end of 3 months. Maybe you can do a different arrangement. But you don't know because you haven't asked yet. So being willing to ask and see if you can renegotiate that agreement. It can even be, again, agreement with yourself, because the agreement you make with anybody else includes yourself. So maybe you got an agreement that you're going to go to the gym for 4 days a week for the next 6 months. But maybe you decided, you know what, I can't do that because I'm too busy, or I need to start going and doing running on the street instead of going to the gym, or riding a bike, something else. Renegotiate that with yourself, because it's only a self-agreement, in quotes, only a self-agreement. But by changing that arrangement inside yourself and making it conscious, so you say to yourself, you write down, it's like, I'm choosing now to change my agreement with myself for my exercise to not go to the gym, and I'm going to run instead. For the next 2 weeks, to see how it goes. Agreement kept, done it. So that's the key, is when you make agreements you can keep, your own self-esteem, your own self-support, your own self-pleasing increases.
Yes.
And you start disengaging that need for somebody else.
I love it. And you really, like, shined a light on something that I've been contemplating for a while, because I found myself overextending my yeses for a while. I was like, I started to heal it with my friends and my family, but then I noticed in my line of work, oh, will you do this video series for us for this? Oh, will you, and it was like, oh, well, I love my work and I want to help and I'm a humanitarian, so yes, I'm not going to say no, and all this stuff. And then I started breaking. It's like, oh yeah, I'll get you. And I did that maybe with you a couple of times where it was like, oh, I'm going to send you this,
and it slipped.
A date, yeah, so that we could like book blah, blah, blah. And then it was like, oh God, that was like 2 days ago. I haven't done that yet. And then you are embarrassed. It's like shame. And so I started seeing it as, like you said, you're not honoring yourself and or the other person to some degree. It's okay to tweak it and everything. But I started to notice the emotions that I was feeling, and I was like, oh. And also, too, one of the things I speak on is speaking with integrity, like really, really honoring yourself and honoring your word. That's one of the 4 agreements, I think, is like honor your word. And I honor my word in a lot of ways, but I started to see all the ways in which I was saying, oh, I'm going to do this, and then I didn't do it, and then I didn't, you know?
Yeah.
Whether, even if it was little, it didn't matter. There was enough of those little things, and I'm like, you know, even if the other person was understanding, it didn't matter. I still wanted to get out of that, like, little habit. So thanks for bringing it up. And I really like all those, like, call to actions.
They're easy to do because because room keeping starts with you, so with yourself. And it's being impeccable with your word is the one you're looking for.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Yes. Yes.
4
Be
agreements.
impeccable. Yes. And funny enough, honor your word is one of my. I talk about making one another feel rad, and really we need to make ourselves feel rad.
Yes.
But one of the letters for rad is respect. And how do you respect other people and or yourself? And one of the things is honor your word. And I think that's one of the reasons I was.
Which is what agreement keeping
yeah.
is.
Yeah, because you said earlier it builds respect and trust.
With yourself and then with other people.
Exactly.
But as you said earlier, you had to say no
breaking.
3 times. Is you also going to start really starting to learn to train other people to recognize that your agreements are your choice, not automatic pilot.
Right, exactly. And when you don't have them established early on, like you said, and then you start to, it's going to take a little bit for everybody to sort of get on board. And the ones that want to give you shit about it, you don't need to be with.
And for some people, you may require you to actually say no consistently for a while, just to break the habit completely, to start with a clean slate.
I did that.
Ah.
I did that, guys. That was not easy. It was like for the next 2 weeks, no matter what, you're going to say no to everything. You know, well, unless I really wanted to do something.
But that's the thing, because then when you do that, when those things come up that you really want to do, you've got the time.
You just knocked it out of the park again, Bear Selby.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, this was a really good one. And the thing is, these talks are really just to kind of open up your awareness, to plant some seeds. Maybe you're already on that journey, you're totally like there, or if anything, just to really spark curiosity.
Yeah.
Because there's just a plethora of information about codependency, and we're just here to be one of the individuals on the planet that are like taking a little bit of time to share what we've gathered thus far about what we can do to overcome it and rise above it. And we're both doing so much better now. So, and listen, each day is a new day to flex new muscles and to flex old muscles, and we're about refining ourselves. So the process of transformation really is ever evolving, and there's always new things that you can learn about yourself and stuff. So, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Perfect.
Perfect. All right. Thanks again for watching Cracking the Codependency Code. Be sure to tune in for more episodes on how you can crack the code.
See you soon.
Be sure to like and follow Rise Above TV for more mindful content.